I've been casting since 2021, and most of that effort has gone towards rings. In that time, I've made these two. Yeah, there were a few others, but these are the only ones I'm proud of. Casting rings is a horrifically difficult process, but every once in a while I get far enough away from failure that I think, you know what, let's ruin another 8 to 20 hours of work. Maybe it'll work this time. Today is one of those days. Let's get into it. I'm going to start by carving it out with my sizing tool. I want it to fit on my ring finger, and I have comically large hands, so this is going to take a minute. Once I have that finished, I'm going to take it out to the belt grinder and smooth down these sharp corners. I want the final design to be pretty rounded. I'll give it a light sanding to smooth everything out, and then we're ready to carve. I made this pendant out of coconut, and I really love how the round organic shapes turned out, so I think I'll combine that with a bronze medium to hopefully great effect. I've never bought any real wax carving tools, so I mostly use these files. Some of them have really nice points on the end, and they make quick work of whatever design you have laid out. I did a quick design in pen, and then I got to work on carving it out. And granted, it looks pretty rough. I definitely wasn't doing anything precise, but there's an easy fix for that. We're just going to do some light passes over the texture and melt it just enough that the curves and ridges smooth out. If you hold it there too long, you'll melt your piece or worse, so just be careful. And that's already such an improvement. I don't want to get crazy, so I'll call it good here with the design. Now we'll go back to the belt grinder and cut it down to a more reasonable size. Sand down those sharp edges, make sure it fits, and we're good to prep it for the mold. This wax rod is going to end up being our sprue. It's a piece of wax that connects the ring to the casting flask and lets the metal through to the negative space. I'm going to lay it on really thick so we end up with a nice wide passage for the bronze later on. I did some more work on it, made sure that we had a nice solid connection on both ends. You're also going to want to smooth that down as much as possible so the metal has nothing to catch on when it goes through. I decided to put another sprue through the middle of the ring so that the bronze would have a really easy passage to the top where most of the bronze is actually going to end up. After trying to do this a bunch of times on camera, I did it off camera because it's easier, and then I melted down these connections so everything was nice and solid. And now with that done, let's get to work on setting it into plaster. You're going to need a scale, 2 measuring cups, some packing tape, a bowl, investment plaster, your ring, and a casting flask. Set your scale to grams and zero out your bowl. This is the plaster I'm going to be using. Scoop out 150 grams of this stuff and measure out your water. The mixture is going to be 20 grams of water to 50 grams of forbidden flour, so you'll need about 60 altogether. Okay, this is where things get tricky. You have a working time of 8 minutes and you can't waste a second of that. Mix these together and keep mixing it for 3 minutes. If you don't have a vacuum machine, just pour it into your mold and tap the sides with a spoon for 5 minutes. If you do have one of these machines, you're going to want to vacuum your plaster for 2 minutes, and while you're doing this, I recommend that you tape up your casting flask. This is going to prevent some spillage when you vacuum this. I recommend just some packing tape. Just wrap it around, get a nice seal. It really doesn't need to be that fancy. Don't overdo it. Pour your plaster into the mold, vacuum it again for another 2 minutes, and then let it sit in somewhere warm for about 45 minutes while you wait for it to harden. Once it's set, we can pop off the bottom and start the burnout process. A real burnout machine is obscenely expensive, so if you've got a good wood stove, that's what I'd recommend. You're going to want some really intense red coals going when you do this, and you're going to want to pile on as many of them as you can onto your flask. For this, we're going to pull out all the stops and use some shiny new bronze. We'll dump that into our crucible, add borax as a flux to keep it nice and smooth, and from there we'll really get cooking. We'll set our crucible, light up our furnace, and prepare for the home stretch. Now, while this section is filled with a lot of nice fire B-roll and steady film work, I was absolutely frantic the whole time. I probably attempted some 60 or 70 rings, so I know just how delicate this process is, and any slip in this part of the procedure would render about 10 hours of work completely wasted. But it was over, and now had come the moment of truth. My hands get kind of shaky here. Some of it was from lack of sleep, but most of it was from nervousness. I'd let my hopes get way too high, so I hesitated. But I only felt a single piece of bronze, and as you can clearly see, I got pretty excited. I gave it a quick clean to get out some of the plaster and bring out some of the details, and I really cannot express what a success this is. Practically no inclusions, clean details, the whole 9 yards. All I needed to do now was get the sprues off and clean it up. But since it's 3 in the morning, I can't use my Dremel, so we'll be using hand files. Yeah, it's gonna be a minute. I did end up finishing it with the Dremel, but those are 2 hours I can never get back. And finally, at the end of the process, the moment I've been waiting for. The last crumbling remains of my polishing compound. We'll give it a nice mirror finish, a quick wash in warm, soapy water, and we will finally have a finished ring. Casting is a grueling hobby, and I definitely thought I'd end this video with a sobering reflection on the toils and bitterness of losing all your hard work. But today, for the first time in literal months, I win. Thanks for coming along. Hope you got something out of this. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.